The financial news broke 3 days later. Sterling Group stock suddenly plunged 8% in a single morning. Inside the Sterling headquarters, the atmosphere was suffocating. Adrian Sterling stood in the conference room staring at the giant screen displaying the market chart. Red numbers. All red. His chief financial officer wiped sweat from his forehead. Someone is shorting our stock aggressively. Adrian's jaw tightened. How much? The CFO hesitated. Hundreds of millions. The room fell silent. Adrian already knew what that meant. This wasn't ordinary speculation. Someone powerful was deliberately pushing Sterling Group toward a liquidity crisis. Find out who it is, Adrian said coldly. But before anyone could respond, his assistant rushed into the room. Mr. Sterling, we already know. The assistant swallowed nervously. It's Knight Capital. The name hit the room like thunder. Everyone knew what that meant. Alexander Knight, one of the youngest hedge fund giants on Wall Street, a man famous for dismantling billion-dollar companies with surgical precision. Adrian's fingers slowly curled into fists. Why would he target us? No one dared answer, but Adrian already suspected. Because 3 nights ago, Alexander Knight had been standing beside Isabella. Across the city, Isabella sat inside the top-floor office of Knight Capital. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire financial district. Alexander Knight stood beside her, sleeves rolled up, studying the market charts. Sterling Group is over-leveraged, he said calmly. They expanded too fast after the acquisition. He tapped the screen. If we apply pressure here, another graph appeared. Their cash flow collapses within 3 months. Isabella watched the screen quietly. Will it destroy the company? Alexander glanced at her. His dark eyes held a faint smile. Do you want it destroyed? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked down at the city below. 3 years of memories flickered through her mind. Late nights, small apartments, dreams she had once shared with Adrian, then the press conference. She died. Isabella finally spoke. I only want fairness. Alexander chuckled softly. That's a dangerous word in finance. He leaned against the desk beside her. But if fairness means bankrupting Sterling Group, his voice lowered slightly. I can arrange that. For the first time, Isabella looked directly at him. You're helping me a lot, Mr. Knight. Alexander met her gaze steadily. I told you to call me Alexander. She raised an eyebrow. And why are you helping me, Alexander? His smile deepened. Because I like watching arrogant men panic. He paused, then added calmly, and because I like you. 2 weeks later, the financial war had escalated. Sterling Group's stock had fallen 23%. The media began whispering about a possible Knight Capital takeover. Adrian hadn't slept in 3 days. When he finally left the office that night, he saw something that made his chest tighten. Across the street, under the glow of a street lamp, Isabella was laughing, and standing beside her, Alexander Knight. The man's tall frame leaned slightly toward her as if shielding her from the cold wind. Adrian had never seen Isabella laugh like that before, not even during the 3 years they had been together. His chest burned. Before he could think, he crossed the street. Isabella. Both of them turned. Alexander's expression didn't change, but Isabella's smile faded instantly. Mr. Sterling. Her tone was distant. Adrian ignored Alexander completely. His eyes stayed fixed on her. Why are you doing this? Isabella tilted her head slightly. Doing what? Helping Knight Capital attack my company. Her lips curved faintly. Your company? She stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a quiet whisper only he could hear. 3 years ago, that company was our dream. The words struck deeper than any insult. Before Adrian could respond, Alexander casually placed a hand on Isabella's shoulder. A subtle gesture, but unmistakably possessive. Mr. Sterling, Alexander said mildly, you should go home and focus on saving your balance sheet. His gaze sharpened slightly. Instead of bothering my partner. Adrian's eyes darkened, but he didn't move, because he understood something very clearly. Alexander Knight was not someone he could afford to provoke, not when his company was already bleeding. Isabella looked at Adrian one last time. Then she turned. "Good night, Mr. Sterling." Alexander followed her toward a waiting black car. Adrian stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the door close behind them. For the first time in his life, Adrian Sterling understood what it felt like to lose everything. The headline appeared on every financial news site the next morning. "The woman who brought down Sterling Group." Beneath it was a photo taken outside Knight Capital's headquarters. Isabella stood beside Alexander Knight. Her black coat fluttered slightly in the wind, while Alexander leaned close enough that the gesture looked almost intimate. The article was brutal. 3 months after being publicly declared dead by Sterling CEO Adrian Sterling, Isabella Sterling reappeared as the mysterious partner behind Knight Capital's aggressive short-selling strategy. Financial insiders say she may be the true architect of Sterling Group's collapse. Inside Sterling headquarters, Adrian slammed the tablet onto his desk. "Who leaked this?" His assistant shook his head nervously. "The media is calling her the Queen of Wall Street Revenge." Adrian felt his temples throb. The photo burned into his mind. Alexander standing beside her. Too close, too comfortable. 3 years. In 3 years, Isabella had never once stood beside Adrian in public like that. Now she looked completely at ease next to another man. Adrian stood abruptly. "Get me everything on Alexander Knight." The assistant froze. "Everything?" Adrian's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I want to know why he's helping her." Meanwhile, inside the quiet elegance of a private restaurant overlooking the harbor, Isabella set down her wine glass. "You know this is making things worse, right?" Across from her, Alexander Knight looked entirely unbothered. "Worse for who?" "For me," she replied. "You've turned me into a public villain." Alexander leaned back casually. His gaze held a hint of amusement. "People fear powerful women." He paused. "Personally, I find them attractive." Isabella rolled her eyes. "Flattery won't work on me." Alexander smiled faintly. "Good." He leaned forward slightly. "Because I'm not flattering you." The candlelight flickered across his face, revealing a rare seriousness in his expression. "Isabella, I didn't help you attack Sterling Group just for entertainment." She met his gaze. "Then why?" For a moment, Alexander seemed to weigh his answer. Finally, he said quietly, "Because I've been watching you for a long time." Isabella blinked. "What?" Alexander swirled the wine in his glass. 3 years ago, when Adrian Sterling was building his startup, there was always a woman beside him, negotiating contracts, calming angry investors, working harder than anyone else in the room." His eyes lifted slowly to hers. "That woman impressed me." Isabella stared at him, stunned. "You knew about me back then?" Alexander nodded. "You were the real strategist behind Sterling's early success." He paused. "And Adrian threw you away." The silence between them deepened. Finally, Alexander added quietly, "That was his biggest mistake." Late that night, Adrian sat alone in his office. A thick file lay open on the desk. Alexander Knight. Age, 32. Founder of Knight Capital. Net worth, billions. Education, Harvard Economics. Reputation, ruthless. But one detail caught Adrian's attention. 3 years ago, Knight Capital had briefly invested in a small advertising startup, the same startup Adrian had founded. Adrian's eyes widened. Alexander had been watching them since the very beginning, which meant he had also been watching Isabella. Adrian's chest tightened with a sudden, ugly realization. Alexander Knight wasn't helping Isabella out of business strategy. He had been waiting for Adrian to lose her, waiting for his chance. Adrian slammed the folder shut. Outside the window, the city lights blurred together. For the first time since the financial war began, Adrian wasn't thinking about Sterling Group's falling stock. He was thinking about something much worse. Alexander Knight might actually win her. A few nights later, Isabella stood on the balcony of Alexander's penthouse. The ocean stretched dark and endless below. Alexander stepped beside her. "You're thinking too much again." She glanced at him. "You've been watching me for 3 years." He didn't deny it. "Yes." "Why?" Alexander looked out at the water for a long moment. Then he said calmly, "Because I knew one day Adrian Sterling would regret losing you." His eyes shifted back to hers, and I wanted to be there when that happened. Isabella felt her heartbeat quicken slightly. "You sound very confident." Alexander's lips curved into a faint smile. "I usually am." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the cool night air. "But I still have one problem." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "What problem?" Alexander met her gaze steadily. "You haven't fallen in love with me yet?" The directness made her laugh softly. "You're very honest." "I'm very patient." He paused, then added quietly, "But not forever." For a moment, neither of them moved. The tension between them felt strangely electric. Isabella suddenly realized something unsettling. For the first time since her breakup, she wasn't thinking about Adrian at all. Sterling Group was collapsing. Within a month, its stock had fallen nearly 40%. Banks began quietly tightening credit lines. Investors whispered about a hostile acquisition. Inside his office, Adrian Sterling stared at the financial reports scattered across his desk. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. Across the market, Alexander Knight controlled the rhythm of the attack like a chess master. Every move Adrian made, Alexander countered effortlessly. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was Isabella. Every news headline paired her name with Alexander Knight. Every photo showed them standing closer together, laughing, talking, looking like a couple. Adrian finally grabbed his coat. There was one thing left he had to do. That evening, Adrian found Isabella outside Knight Capital's headquarters. She had just finished a meeting. The moment she saw him, she stopped walking. "Mr. Sterling." Her voice was calm, but Adrian could see the caution in her eyes. "I just want 5 minutes," he said quietly. For a moment, she hesitated, then she nodded. They walked to a nearby terrace overlooking the city. The skyline glowed gold beneath the evening sky. Adrian spoke first. "I know I can't undo what I did." Isabella said nothing. "I was afraid back then," he continued. "The Sterling family demanded I marry into another powerful family. If they knew I was with you, they would have destroyed the company." Isabella finally looked at him. "So your solution was to erase me?" Adrian lowered his gaze. "Yes." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Isabella sighed softly. "Adrian, the problem isn't what you did. It's that you believed I wasn't worth fighting for." The words landed gently, but they cut deeper than anger. Adrian looked at her desperately. "Is there truly no chance for us?" Isabella held his gaze for several seconds. Then she shook her head. "No." Her voice was steady. "I loved you once. But I won't return to someone who chose power over me." Behind them, another voice spoke calmly. "I think that answers your question." Alexander Knight stepped forward from the shadows. His expression was relaxed, but his presence alone shifted the atmosphere. Adrian's jaw tightened. Alexander stopped beside Isabella. "Mr. Sterling," he said politely, "I suggest you focus on your shareholders." Adrian's voice was cold. "You planned this from the beginning." Alexander didn't deny it. "Yes." "Why?" Alexander looked at Isabella briefly, then back at Adrian. "Because you didn't deserve her." The blunt answer left Adrian speechless. Alexander continued calmly. "I gave you several chances to stabilize Sterling Group. You failed." He slipped his hands into his pockets. "So tomorrow morning, Knight Capital will acquire a controlling stake in your company." The words hit like a final hammer. Sterling Group was finished. Adrian stared at Isabella. She didn't look triumphant, just calm. The war was over. and he had lost everything that mattered. Without another word, Adrian turned and walked away. Weeks later, the financial world buzzed with news. Knight Capital officially acquired Sterling Group's major assets. Adrian resigned as CEO. The once ruthless heir had disappeared from public view. Meanwhile, Isabella stood once again on a balcony overlooking the city. The wind carried the distant sound of traffic far below. Alexander stepped beside her. "You're thinking about him." She didn't deny it. 3 years is a long time. Alexander nodded. "I can wait." Isabella looked at him with mild amusement. "You seem very confident." Alexander smiled slightly. "I usually win." She laughed softly. Then after a moment, she asked, "So, what happens now, Mr. Knight?" Alexander turned toward her. His voice dropped slightly. "Now?" He gently took her hand. "Now I try to convince the most stubborn woman in the city to date me." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "And if I say no?" Alexander's eyes glinted with quiet determination. "Then I'll keep trying." For the first time in a long while, Isabella felt something warm bloom in her chest. She squeezed his hand lightly. "That sounds exhausting." Alexander smiled. "I have patience." The city lights stretched endlessly below them, and this time, Isabella didn't walk away. 1 year later, the financial world looked very different. Knight Capital had become one of the most powerful investment firms in the country. And beside its CEO stood a woman the media had once called the woman who crashed an empire, but now they called her something else. The Queen of Strategic Finance. Inside a bright conference hall in New York, Isabella finished presenting a billion-dollar investment plan. The room erupted into applause. Alexander Knight leaned against the back wall, watching her with quiet pride. When the meeting ended, he walked over and handed her a glass of champagne. "You just terrified half the investors in that room," he said. Isabella smiled faintly. "That means they'll listen." Alexander studied her for a moment. "You've changed." She raised an eyebrow. "In a good way, I hope." "In a powerful way," he corrected. They stepped onto the balcony outside the conference hall. The skyline shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Isabella rested her arms on the railing. "Do you regret helping me destroy Sterling Group?" she asked. Alexander didn't hesitate. "Not even a little." Then he added quietly, "I'd do it again if it meant meeting you." For a moment, Isabella said nothing. Then she leaned lightly against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. 2 years later, a quiet headline appeared in the business pages. "Former Sterling CEO launches new technology startup." Adrian Sterling had disappeared after losing his company, but he hadn't vanished completely. In a modest office far from Wall Street, Adrian looked very different from the man he once was. Less arrogance, more patience. His assistant placed a newspaper on his desk. The front page showed a photo of Alexander Knight and Isabella Sterling attending a charity gala. They looked happy. Adrian studied the picture for a long moment. Then he folded the newspaper quietly. He no longer felt the same crushing jealousy, only a dull regret. His assistant asked cautiously, "Do you want to respond to the media asking about Miss Sterling?" Adrian shook his head. "No." He looked out the window at the busy street below. "That chapter of my life is over." And for the first time, he meant it. 3 years after the fall of Sterling Group, Alexander Knight finally ran out of patience. It happened on a quiet evening at his penthouse overlooking the ocean. Isabella stepped onto the balcony and found candles everywhere. She raised an eyebrow. "This looks suspicious." Alexander stood beside the railing, looking unusually serious. "You said I was patient." She crossed her arms. "You are." He turned to face her. "But I'm reaching my limit." Isabella laughed softly. "Oh?" Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, a diamond caught the moonlight. Her breath caught slightly. "You've chased hostile takeovers worth billions," she said slowly. "And you're nervous about this?" Alexander exhaled. Yes. He stepped closer. Because this is the only deal I can't force. His voice softened. Isabella Sterling. He took her hand. Will you marry me? For several seconds, she said nothing. The ocean waves echoed faintly below them. Finally, Isabella smiled. You're terrible at proposals. Alexander frowned. I spent 3 weeks planning this. She laughed softly. Then she slipped the ring onto her finger herself. That's a yes. Relief flooded his expression. He pulled her into his arms as the city lights shimmered across the water, and somewhere far behind them, the past finally stopped mattering.